All right, today we're diving into the single most complex object in the entire known universe, your brain. We're going to do a quick and dirty review of some psychological phenomena that, believe it or not, shape your entire world. So let's just start with a huge question. How much of what you see, what you feel, what you remember is actually real? The answer might be a lot less than you think. What if I told you your brain is constantly predicting, editing, and sometimes flat out inventing your reality? Think of this as your new favorite exam review session. We're going to hit the highlights, the really mind-blowing concepts that show how your brain doesn't just see reality, it actively builds it. So let's jump right in. Okay, first up, the brain's incredible flexibility. For the longest time, we kind of thought the brain was basically set in stone after childhood. But it turns out it's way more like clay than it is like concrete. And this brings us to this amazing idea called neuroplasticity. Basically, it's the fact that your brain can physically rewire itself. Every single thing you do, every skill you learn, it literally forges new connections between your neurons. And no, that's not a metaphor. That's biology. And you see this in action everywhere. You learn to play an instrument, your brain physically changes. Seriously, musicians have measurably different brain structures, especially in the areas that process sound. Athletes train their motor pathways to fire faster. Even something like meditation can literally reshape the parts of your brain that handle your emotions. So the big takeaway here is that your brain is always a work in progress, and you're the artist. The habits you practice today are quite literally sculpting the brain you're going to have tomorrow. That's an incredibly empowering idea, right? Okay, so what about memory? I think most of us picture it like a little video camera in our heads, perfectly recording our past. But psychology shows us that's completely wrong. Which leads us to the wild phenomenon of false memory. So get this. Every time you remember something, your brain doesn't just hit play. It rebuilds the memory from little bits and pieces of information. And during that reconstruction process, things can get, well, creative. Errors slip in, details get changed, and sometimes your brain just fills in the gaps. It is so powerful that scientists have actually managed to implant completely false memories of entire events into people's minds. And you can imagine this has some huge real-world implications. It's a big reason why eyewitness testimony can be so unreliable. Your memory isn't a perfect record. It's more like an ongoing story that you're constantly editing. So our minds are flexible and our memories aren't totally reliable, which naturally leads to the question, how in the world do we make decisions? Well, let's look at some of the hidden forces that guide our choices, often without us even having a clue. Okay, this one is one of the most shocking discoveries in all of neuroscience. Using brain scans, researchers can actually see a decision forming in your brain's activity a full 7 to 10 seconds before you were consciously aware of making it. Your conscious mind might just be the last one to get the memo. I mean, just pause and think about that for a second. If your brain has already made the call, how much of your choice is actually free? It's a massive question that keeps philosophers and neuroscientists up at night. Now, here's something you've probably felt before. You'd think more choices would always be better, right? Nope. Wrong. Welcome to the world of choice overload. When your brain gets hit with too many options, it can actually lead to paralysis and anxiety. So in this classic study, a supermarket set up 2 tasting booths for jam. One offered 24 different flavors, and the other offered just 6. Now, the booth with 24 jams got more attention, sure, but the one with only 6 choices? It resulted in 10 times more sales. Sometimes less really is more. You ever wonder why you can't stop thinking about that one email you still have to send, or that project you haven't quite finished? That's the Zeigarnik effect. Your brain is essentially programmed to put a big red flag on incomplete tasks, keeping them right at the front of your mind until you finally get them done. This is the psychological trick behind every great TV show cliffhanger. Your brain absolutely craves closure, and the people who make these shows know it. That little mental itch you get, that desperate need to know what happens next, that's the Zeigarnik effect in action. All right, for our final section, let's talk about the deep and often pretty surprising connection between your physical body and your emotional experiences. They're way more tangled up than you might think. As human beings, we are just fundamentally social creatures. For our entire history, survival has depended on being part of a group. And that's why social rejection, being excluded or cast out, it doesn't just hurt our feelings. It triggers a deep, primal alarm bell.
Now, this is absolutely incredible. Brain imaging studies have shown that when you experience social rejection, it activates the exact same parts of the brain as physical pain. So when someone says a breakup feels like a punch to the gut, they're not really exaggerating. On a neurological level, it's remarkably similar.
And here's another cool example of that mind-body link. It's called the facial feedback hypothesis. And it's the idea that the simple act of moving your facial muscles can send signals back to your brain that actually change how you feel.
What's so fascinating here is that it's a two-way street. Yeah, your emotions cause you to smile, but forcing a smile can also, in turn, make you feel just a little bit happier. Your body and your brain are in this constant feedback loop, which means changing your posture or your expression can be a sneaky shortcut to changing your mood. Okay, let's do a super quick final review for the exam. What did we learn? Your brain is not a passive observer of the world. It's an active builder. It rewires itself, it creatively reconstructs your past, it often makes decisions before you even do, and it processes emotional pain a lot like a physical injury. Your reality is basically a masterpiece of neurological construction. And all of this leaves us with one final, pretty profound question to chew on. If your brain is constantly building the world you experience, moment by moment, then who's really in charge? Who is the architect? Thanks for joining this explainer.